exports, Dublin, and the other is Rosslare. They're fairly quick, about an hour from Dublin to Fishguard, and the other one then is about an hour and a half to 2 hours from Rosslare to Cherbourg. So that's how we would, if we're going to drive across Europe. So what you do, get the ferry to France, get the ferry to Britain. Obviously the ferry to France is more expensive because you're getting to the continent quicker. It's cheaper to go through Britain, but then you remember you have to drive then 5 hours from Fishguard down to London, and then make your way to Dover, and then use the tunnel to get into Calais in France. So traditionally as well, we would always have used Britain as a land bridge, and I suppose that's one of the things too with the whole Brexit thing. A lot of goods, a lot of movement goes through Britain to get to the continent, and now that is going to be eventually blocked off, so we have to find ways around it. So you'll probably see a lot more business now with the port in Rosslare going straight to Cherbourg rather than the other port going off to Fishguard in Wales. Just makes it easier because we're in a common travel area with the European Union, and also we have common economic policies as well, and with that tariff-free, trade and all that, so we'd rather not have to pay tariffs to get through Britain to get there, so we might as well just go around them. The single market really is the best thing that we have out of Europe. The common market as well gives you access to 500 million people. That's the main reason why we use those ferries. So the huge amount of most of our goods ferried in. But like I said, most people will just fly places. No one really bothers driving. You will get people that get camper vans and they go off driving around France, Germany, that kind of thing. But really, it's kind of Western Europe most people go to. They won't really venture to Eastern Europe, especially if they're driving. And a lot of Irish people, if they decide to go on holidays in Eastern Europe, they end up going to holiday places like, the Black Sea coast of Bulgaria and places like that. They don't go into the middle of the abyss like Moldova or any of those other places. So guys, just while we leave Kilkenny, just to let you know, we're straight back to Dublin now, so we should be in Dublin about 6:10. And of course we're doing our drop-offs then. Drop-offs will be the pick-up points in reverse. So Suffolk Street first, then O'Connell Street, then our office on Lower Gardner Street. And obviously with all the agriculture around here, guys, you will have noticed lots and lots of, fields of just corn, especially when you come in here to Kilkenny. Export-led economy, we don't have a whole lot going on in the domestic economy. So pretty much we are very much vulnerable to global shocks. So if any trade war happens between the US and China, we are affected, to put it mildly. So Ireland really, to be honest with you, I think it's not one of the most, it's the most globalized country in the world. We have a huge, huge export industry here, and that's where all our money comes from, is exports. So agriculture is the main one. We, a bit like the time of the famine, we're still producing more food than we need to feed the population here. That's all being exported. So it's going to the European Union, it's going to the Middle East, it's going out to China as well, it's going to America, Canada, and there's a new trade deal being done now with Japan. So we have a huge footprint when it comes to these things. Agriculture, like I said, worth billions. After that then, if you look at the top 4 things that we export into number 3 is technology. Dublin, known as the Silicon Valley of Europe because of Facebook and Google and all these huge tech companies have set up their European bases in Ireland. And Apple as well down in Cork City. It's European bases there since the 1970s. And they're all here pretty much because we give them nice tax breaks that we don't talk about. After that then as well, tourism into number 4 because we always had tours here in Ireland, but none to the effect of what we have now. And that is why at the moment, a company like Paddy Wagon, so many people coming here, you just can't keep up with the demand. So we have to hire in buses, and even we're getting to a stage, the companies that you hire in don't have enough buses. And we have a bit of a shortage at the moment in the country of buses and of drivers for them. All because of it being such a big thing now, tours in Ireland. So the number 2 export out of the country is one that you're not going to guess. One woman did guess it before because she worked in the industry. What do you think the second biggest thing we export is?
Water.
Not beer, that comes under agriculture and tax breaks.
Pharmacy.
I know you know it, so just... Not to shut up, but I'll get you to shout. You know where I'm going with this.
Guinness. No. Drugs.
So we've identified the people who are on tour with me before. So, sorry? Not potatoes, again, that's agriculture. Stop thinking about food and just think of other things. So, pharmaceuticals, guys, is the second biggest thing that we export. We have a huge amount of pharmaceutical companies here. So, medical equipment, we are one of the world's biggest manufacturers in, and we export that. So any country that you're in, if you're in hospital, more than likely the equipment that they're using has been manufactured in Ireland. And we have companies like Baxter that are huge companies in that. We also produce a lot of drugs. They are good drugs. They're not the other drugs, even though we produce some of those as well. And back in the 1990s, Pfizer, when they came here, decided to put a new blood pressure tablet into production. And when it went to clinical trials, they realized that it did make your blood pressure rise, but not in the area that was intended. Now, Mr. Costa Rican behind me, this is a small little blue pill. Now, Mrs. Bouvier, what pill is it?
Viagra.
It's Viagra. Viagra. If you learned nothing else today, guys, about anything, go back to your countries and tell everyone that you know that Ireland is the world's largest producer of Viagra. And that is a fact. We have been making people very happy for many years. We have saved a lot of marriages, and if you overuse it, we've caused a lot of divorces. And of course, as you all know, those of you that were with me at the causeway, if you see leprechauns in these areas, do be very careful, because they will be 3 inches taller than they should be. It does get into the water sometimes, so you have to be careful you don't trip over them. You'll cause them excruciating pain. We're also the world's largest producer of silicone. So if you're thinking of getting a nose job or anything else, we've got you covered. So we cover a lot of bases here in Ireland. But the main thing is the Viagra. Sometimes we mix it up with the sugar, which explains why Teddy has been sitting down all day. Sorry? Shipbuilding was a major industry here, yeah, but it died out in the 1950s. And then of course you had the troubles in Northern Ireland that just put an end to that. They killed the industry altogether. Completely destroyed it. And what they do now in Belfast, especially Harland and Wolff, where they built the Titanic, they just kind of bring ships there now for maintenance. They don't build ships anymore in it. But at the time, Belfast, 100 years ago, was the economic powerhouse of the island. That's where you had the linen industry and you had the shipbuilding, and that's what kept the country going. But unfortunately, those two industries have pretty much died now up there. It made sense at the time when Ireland was partitioned in the 1920s, because if Britain kept Northern Ireland, there was a lot of good land, there was a huge economic value to them. But then of course the war happened and that killed all that, and now they have to pump billions of pounds into Northern Ireland in order just to keep it afloat now, because it can't survive on its own. So just to bring myself back to the point that I was on about before I last left you, and I'll finish up then the history with that, and you won't have to listen to me anymore then. We had got up to the point where I was on about the Fenians, and that money coming from the Irish Americans back here to the Fenian movement, and they were buying guns. They were, at the time, really deploying what we call guerrilla tactics in order to, basically fight the English and hope to try and get them out of the country. And at the time, so you had two parties in Ireland. Sinn Féin was one of them, most of you will have heard of them, and the Labour Party was the other. Now Sinn Féin, throughout history, has always been kind of on the peripheral of politics. They've been the Republican Party, but they've never actually been in the, the main centre of negotiations or anything. They've always been on the fringes. So the Labour Party, the main party of the day. Now what happens is in Ireland, a lot of unrest at the time. The British are thinking we need to change things again, a bit like what they did with the Act of Union, and they decide the best thing to do is make Ireland more or less an autonomous region. So you're not making it an independent country, you're just going to make it like a dominion of the empire. So kind of like Australia, Canada at the time, where you're basically saying, right, you go off and run yourselves, but we'll still collect taxes off you. You still have to have the king as the head of state. So at the time, this was kind of put forward to people as a stepping stone. Go for this now, full independence will come at a later date. So Labour Party, most politicians in Ireland are backing this idea, and this becomes known as Home Rule, or the Home Rule movement. So the idea is become an autonomous region, a dominion. So it's about to come into force, and then World War I breaks out. Because World War I has broken out, that now distracts the British, and they say, right, sorry, we're parking that now, we're shelving that. You go and fight for us in World War I, and we'll give you home rule when the war is over, because of course nobody knew when the war was going to end or how awful it was actually going to be. So they didn't have conscription in Ireland, and the reason for that was basically because they knew it would cause a huge amount of civil unrest if they did rebellion again, so they left it up to volunteering. So thousands of people joined the British Army back then, and again, most of it for economic reasons. There was nothing here in Ireland, there was no infrastructure, there was nothing really you could do with anything. It was the only way to make money and maybe go out and see a bit of the world. So most people, just over 200,000, signed up in 1914 to go fight with Britain. In the middle of those war years you had 1916, significant because of the Battle of the Somme, but here in Ireland you had the Easter Rising. Now the Easter Rising took place in April, and basically it was a group of rebel leaders flanked by two army factions who saw it as their perfect time to basically try and strike Britain now while it was distracted. Best time to end English rule, kick them while they're down. So Easter week 1916, they take over the GPO in Dublin, and they take over strategic buildings all around the city. Now considering the training they had, the arms they had, and also as well their setup, they did quite well in holding out the city for about a week. Eventually the English just got sick of them, sailed their boats up the River Liffey and shelled the city centre. So when you're around O'Connell Bridge, all of that area of O'Connell Street, Delir Street, Westmoreland Street, all of that was completely levelled in 1916 and it was rebuilt. The only thing on O'Connell Street that actually predates 1916 architecturally are the columns of the GPO. Now when you walk around them, you'll still see the bullet holes in them and the different cracks and things from the shrapnel and the crossfire. So with this, it comes to an end, that rebellion. The rebel leaders are basically rallied around, and then they are sent off then to Kilmainham jail. The ones that are in the army that take part, they're sent off to prisons in England and Wales. With this, there is no public support in Ireland for a rebellion. It's important to know that, because a lot of people think when you read Irish history as well that everyone was behind the Republican movement, and that is not the case. A lot of people thought that the rebellion in 1916 was a stupid thing and that it shouldn't have happened, considering that so many people were fighting for the British. So there was no public opinion at all in support of it. And in fact, when the leaders of the 1916 rebellion were marched off to Kilmainham jail, they were jeered, people threw fruit at them, spat at them, people did not like them. Now, the reason why it changed was because the British basically did something that it was going to be kind of the start of a lot of different mistakes, from just not understanding the people here, not understanding the culture and how things work, and basically they executed the leaders. At the time, one guy, James Connolly, he was basically tied to a chair and shot because his legs were broken, so he couldn't stand. And the irony of the day was that if you were going to be executed, you had to be in full health. So because he wasn't, people thought this was, a very bad thing to do, wasn't good form, and with that, the opinion of kind of anti-rebellion now turned to anti-British. And with this then, more civil unrest hit Ireland at the end of 1916. Got so bad in 1917, they released the prisoners from England and Wales. They all come back over to Ireland. The violence doesn't really stop. If anything, it gets worse, and this is because you've got two guys now released from prison who fought in 1916, and they now become very influential in the new state that's about to emerge, and that is Michael Collins and Eamon de Valera. Michael Collins now is the military leader that we lacked for centuries. He's the person now that really is going to manage to put the whole Irish army into one direction and, just run the army properly, because we just hadn't had that before. Eamon de Valera then, very good statesman, and he's important to keep that money coming in, especially from Irish America. With this in 1918, these guys start another rebellion, and really what happens is we come into the Wars of Independence. So, guerrilla warfare, as it's now known, is what they choose to do, and you start to see the Irish win. The British are not used to fighting a guerrilla war, and again, Michael Collins, very, very clever and very tactful as well. And really what wins it for him at the end of the day is that he manages to infiltrate the English spy network in Ireland. So this means now that the Irish know every move of the English, and the English now have their backs up against the wall and they don't know where to go. So, in 1919, because,